Should I end my engagement after my fiancée said she wished I died instead of her late husband? M32, elementary school teacher, and I need perspective because I can't tell if I'm overreacting or if what happened was as bad as it felt. I've been with Victoria for 2 years, engaged for 6 months. She's 29, works in marketing, lost her husband David in a car accident 3 years ago. When we met through mutual friends, she was still deep in grief, and I tried to be patient and understanding about that. Victoria's been open about struggling with moving on. She talks about David a lot, how funny he was, how successful, how he would have handled situations differently than me. I get it. Losing someone that young and suddenly has to be devastating, and I never wanted her to feel like she had to hide her grief from me. But lately, I've been wondering if patience crossed a line into letting myself get treated poorly. Here's what happened Sunday that made me question everything. We were at my parents' house for dinner. My mom had made my grandmother's pot roast recipe, something I'd been excited to share with Victoria since she'd never tried it. When we sat down to eat, my mom mentioned that it was a family recipe passed down for generations. Victoria took a few bites and said, "It's good, but David's mom made the best pot roast I've ever had. She had this secret ingredient that made it actually melt in your mouth." "This is nice though." My mom's face fell. She'd spent all afternoon cooking this meal specifically because I'd told her Victoria might enjoy it. But Victoria didn't seem to notice the impact of what she'd said. Then my dad started telling a story about his work, and Victoria interrupted to say, "David had the funniest story about dealing with difficult clients. Blake, you should hear this. David would have handled that situation so much better. He had this way of diffusing tension that just came naturally to him." This is a pattern that's been building for months. Every conversation somehow becomes about how David was better at whatever we're discussing. Every meal gets compared to something David cooked, or somewhere David took her. Every story I tell reminds her of a funnier story David would have told. I usually just smile and nod because I don't want to be the guy who gets jealous of a dead person. But Sunday, after 2 hours of listening to how David would have done everything better, my dad finally said, "Victoria, Blake's here too, you know." That's when she exploded. "I'm sorry that my grief makes you uncomfortable," she said. "I'm sorry that talking about the love of my life bothers you. David was the most incredible man I've ever known, and if you can't handle that, maybe Blake isn't ready for a real relationship." I tried to calm things down. "Nobody's saying you can't talk about David, but maybe we could have one family dinner where the conversation isn't entirely about how much better he was at everything." She stared at me for a long moment, then said something that I can't stop thinking about. "You know what, Blake? Sometimes I wish that car accident had taken you instead of him. At least then I'd be grieving someone who actually mattered instead of wasting my time with someone who'll never measure up." The entire table went silent. My mom looked horrified. My dad actually stood up from his chair. I said, "I think we should leave," and Victoria just shrugged like she'd commented on the weather. The drive home was 40 minutes of complete silence. When we got to her place, I told her I needed some time to think about what she'd said. Think about what? That I'm still in love with my husband? Because that's not news, Blake. I've never hidden that from you. That was Sunday. It's Wednesday now, and I still feel sick thinking about it. Not just because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it. Like she'd been thinking it for a while. I've been questioning everything about our relationship, the constant comparisons, the way she talks about our future like it's just something to fill time until... What? Until David comes back from the dead? My friend Qley thinks I should end the engagement immediately. Says no amount of grief justifies telling someone you wish they were dead instead of your ex. My sister Niall agrees, says Victoria's been emotionally abusive and I've been too understanding to see it. But my mom thinks I should be more compassionate, says grief makes people say things they don't mean, that Victoria's probably just struggling with survivor's guilt and taking it out on the wrong person. I don't know. Part of me feels like I'm being selfish for not being more understanding of her loss. But another part of me feels like I've been setting myself on fire to keep her grief warm, and I'm tired of pretending that's normal. So AITA for wanting to end our engagement over what she said, or should I be more patient with someone who's still processing trauma? Update 1. The responses to my original post were pretty eye-opening. A lot of people pointed out behaviors I'd been excusing as grief that actually sounded more like emotional abuse. I'd been so focused on being understanding that I hadn't been protecting myself. So I decided to pay attention. Really pay attention, instead of just accepting everything Victoria said as normal grief processing. Thursday morning, Victoria said she had to drive to her hometown for a work meeting. She's done this maybe once a month since we've been together. Always on the same day of the week, always overnight. I never questioned it because she seemed stressed about these trips, and I didn't want to add pressure. But this time, something felt off. The way she packed seemed different. Less professional clothes, more personal items. And when I asked about the meeting, her details were vague in a way they'd never been before. I didn't follow her or anything crazy like that. But I did something I probably should have done months ago. I started looking around our apartment with fresh eyes. Victoria moved in 6 months ago, but she's always kept the spare bedroom as her office space. I respected that boundary. Everyone needs their own space, especially someone processing grief. But Thursday night, while she was gone, I noticed the door was slightly open. I'm not proud of this, but I looked inside. It wasn't an office, it was a shrine. The entire room was dedicated to David. Professional photos of him on every surface, their wedding photos blown up and framed, his clothes hanging in the closet like he might come back for them, his cologne on the dresser, his books arranged exactly as they probably were when he was alive. But the strangest part was her jewelry box on the nightstand. Inside was her wedding ring from David, which she's apparently been wearing on a chain under her clothes our entire relationship. I'd never seen it, never known it existed. There was also a journal. I know I shouldn't have read it, but after finding out my fiancé has been maintaining a full shrine to another man in our home, normal privacy rules felt less important. The entries were dated, recent ones. She'd been writing in it regularly, including during our relationship. Blake made dinner tonight but used too much salt. David always seasoned things perfectly without even tasting first. I don't know why I'm settling for someone who doesn't understand basic cooking. Took Blake to David's favorite restaurant. He ordered wrong, tipped wrong, didn't get the references I made to things David and I shared there. Felt like bringing a stranger to a sacred place. Blake proposed last month. Said yes because what else am I going to do? But it felt like betrayal. David was supposed to be my only husband. This is just practice. Killing time until I figure out what my life is supposed to be. The most recent entry was from 2 weeks ago. Blake's family dinner was torture. They keep trying to include me in their traditions like I belong there. Don't they understand that I already had a family? David's family was perfect. These people are just placeholders. And then the line that made my blood run cold. Sometimes I imagine David coming back and seeing me with Blake. I'd explain that Blake was just temporary, that I was just keeping myself company until David returned. David would understand. David always understood me. I sat in that room for 2 hours, reading entry after entry about how I was temporary, how everything I did was wrong compared to David, how our entire relationship was just her killing time until her dead husband somehow came back to life. When Victoria got home Friday evening, I was sitting in the living room with the journal. Blake, what are you doing with that? Learning about my relationship. Apparently, I'm just practice for when David returns from the dead. She tried to explain it away. Said journals are private thoughts, that grief makes you write things you don't mean, that of course she knew David wasn't coming back. Then why do you visit his grave every month? She went pale. What? Your work trips. They're to his grave, aren't they? She didn't deny it. Just started crying and saying I didn't understand what it meant to love someone the way she loved David. Victoria, you're engaged to me. You live with me. You sleep in my bed and wear his wedding ring under your clothes and write about me like I'm some annoying roommate you're stuck with until you can move out. It's not like that. What's it like then? Because from where I'm sitting, you've been in a relationship with a dead man for 2 years while using me for companionship and someone to split rent with. That's when she said something I'll never forget. You don't understand, because you've never loved anyone the way I love David. What we had was once in a lifetime. What you and I have is convenient. Convenient. 2 years of my life. An engagement ring. Moving in together. Meeting each other's families. All of it was just convenient to her. I told her I needed time to think, and she said she'd stay at her sister's for the weekend. That was Friday. It's Tuesday now, and I still don't know if I'm more angry or heartbroken. My friend Qley came over Saturday and helped me box up everything from the shrine room. I couldn't live with it anymore. When Victoria comes back, we're going to have a conversation about whether she wants to be engaged to me or just keep me around until she figures out how to resurrect her husband. Update 2. After my last update, Victoria came back from her sister's to collect more of her things. I told her we needed to talk about the journal, the shrine, what our relationship actually was to her. She tried to explain it away, said the journal was just a place to process her grief, that keeping David's things helped her feel connected to him, that everyone grieves differently. Victoria, you wrote that I was temporary, that you were just killing time until David came back. Dead people don't come back. I know that, she snapped, but you don't understand what it's like to lose the love of your life. Then help me understand. Tell me about the accident. That's when she got cagey. Started giving me the same vague details she'd always given. Car accident, sudden, no time to say goodbye. But for the first time, I was actually listening instead of just accepting. What kind of car accident? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. You're asking me to build a life around your grief for this man. I should know something concrete about how he died. She couldn't give me details. Said she didn't like talking about it, that I was being insensitive. But something felt wrong about her responses. After she left that night, I did something I probably should have done 2 years ago. I looked him up. David Cross, 31, lives in Portland, Oregon. Very much alive. Married to someone named Aria Ryler about a year ago. Their wedding photos are all over his social media. I stared at those photos for an hour. This man who had supposedly died in a tragic car accident was posting pictures from his honeymoon in Italy 2 months ago. I started digging deeper. Found their divorce papers from 3 years ago. Not death records. Divorce records. The truth is so much uglier than the lie Victoria's been telling. David didn't die in a car accident. He left her for another woman. The divorce papers show irreconcilable differences, but Victoria's sister Brielle was tagged in some old Facebook posts that painted a clearer picture. David had been having an affair with a co-worker for months. When Victoria found out, she tried to fight for the marriage, but David chose the other woman. He filed for divorce, moved across the country, and started over with someone else. Victoria never got over it. Instead of accepting that her husband left her for someone he loved more, she created this fiction that he died tragically, making her a sympathetic widow instead of a woman who got abandoned. When I confronted her with the evidence Tuesday night, she completely broke down. Blake, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been lying about your entire relationship history for 3 years? That you made me think I was competing with a dead man when I was actually competing with someone who just didn't want you? It wasn't like that. David was confused. He made a mistake. If he hadn't moved away, we could have worked things out. Victoria, he married someone else. He chose someone else. This isn't a tragedy. This is just a relationship that ended. That's when she said something that made everything clear. You don't understand. What David and I had was real love. He just got scared of the intensity. With you, it's comfortable, safe, but it's not the same thing. So you've been using me as a placeholder while you waited for him to come back? I thought maybe if I proved I could move on, if he saw me happy with someone else, he'd realize what he lost. I've been with this woman for 2 years, lived with her, planned to marry her, and the entire time, she was using our relationship as some kind of reverse psychology play to win back a man who chose someone else. The cruelest part is how she weaponized fake grief to shut down any criticism. Every time I questioned the constant David comparisons, she'd act like I was being cruel to a grieving widow. Every time I suggested therapy or moving forward, she'd say I didn't understand loss. But she wasn't grieving a death, she was obsessing over a rejection. I called David yesterday, found his number online and just called him. David, this is Blake Morrison. I'm engaged to your ex-wife Victoria. Long pause. Oh man, how is she? Complicated question. She's been telling everyone you died in a car accident. Longer pause. What? For 3 years, she's been claiming to be a widow. I just found out yesterday that you're alive and remarried. Jesus Christ. Blake, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was... Victoria never handled our divorce well, but I thought she'd moved on. That's why I moved to Oregon, to give her space to heal. We talked for about 20 minutes. David confirmed what I'd suspected. Their marriage ended because he fell in love with someone else, not because of some external tragedy. Victoria had become increasingly controlling and possessive as their relationship deteriorated, which ultimately pushed him toward Aria. She made our divorce as difficult as possible, he said, contested everything, tried to drag it out, kept saying I just needed more time to remember what we had. I felt terrible about hurting her, but I couldn't stay married to someone I didn't love anymore. Did she ever accept that it was over? No. The last contact I had with her was about 6 months after the divorce was final. She sent me this long email about how she knew I'd realize my mistake eventually, how she'd be waiting when I was ready to come home. When I got off the phone with David, I felt this weird mix of relief and horror. Relief because I finally understood what I'd been dealing with. Horror because I realized I'd spent 2 years being emotionally manipulated by someone who wasn't even grieving, just using fake tragedy to justify treating me like garbage. Victoria's been staying at her sister's since I found the journal, but yesterday she came by to get more clothes. I told her what I'd learned. I talked to David, the color drained from her face. What did you tell him? The truth, that his ex-wife has been pretending he's dead for 3 years. Blake, you don't understand the situation. I understand it perfectly now. You got divorced because your husband fell in love with someone else. Instead of processing that rejection like an adult, you created this elaborate fiction where you're a tragic widow instead of just someone whose marriage didn't work out. She tried to spin it, said David was the love of her life, that she couldn't help holding on to hope. But I was done listening to her justify using fake grief to manipulate me. Victoria, you told me you wished I'd died instead of your husband. You said that about someone who's alive and happily married to someone else. I was angry. You were angry at me for not being good enough to make you stop wanting a man who chose someone else over you. Do you realize how fucked up that is? I ended the engagement. Not just because of the lying, but because I finally understood that I'd never been her boyfriend. I'd been her emotional support animal while she fantasized about her ex-husband coming back. Final update. Victoria is in therapy now. Not by choice. Her family staged an intervention after they found out about the fake widow story and forced her into counseling. Her sister Brielle reached out to me about a month after everything came out to apologize for enabling Victoria's lies and to let me know they were getting her help. We knew something was wrong, she told me, but we thought we were protecting her by going along with the story. We didn't realize she was using that story to manipulate other people. Victoria herself tried to contact me several times over the past few months. Phone calls, texts, even showing up at my school once. Always the same message. She was getting help. She understood what she'd done wrong. She wanted another chance to be the partner I deserved. I didn't engage, not because I was angry, though I was for a while, but because I finally understood something I should have learned 2 years earlier. You can't build a healthy relationship with someone who's still fundamentally dishonest about who they are. The real update, though, is about Mira. Mira Hollis is a 3rd-grade teacher at my school. We've worked together for 3 years, always been friendly, but I was with Victoria, so nothing ever developed beyond professional friendship. After everything happened with Victoria, Mira was one of the people who really checked on me, made sure I was doing okay. 3 months ago, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee after a particularly stressful parent conference day. We ended up talking for 4 hours. What struck me immediately was how different it felt to be in conversation with someone who was genuinely interested in getting to know me, not someone who was constantly measuring me against an impossible standard. When I told her about my weekend plans, she didn't compare them to what someone else would have done. When I made dinner for us a few weeks later, she didn't mention how her ex-boyfriend used to cook the same dish better. When I talked about my students or my family or things I was excited about, she listened with actual interest instead of waiting for her turn to talk about someone else. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be chosen instead of tolerated. We've been together officially for 2 months now, and it's the healthiest relationship I've ever been in, not just compared to Victoria, but compared to anything I've experienced. Mira talks about me to her friends the way people talk about things they're genuinely enthusiastic about. She remembers details from conversations we had weeks ago. She asks questions about my life because she actually wants to know the answers. The contrast is so stark that I keep being surprised by normal relationship behavior. Last week, she brought me soup when I was sick, and my first thought was wondering what she wanted in return. It took me a moment to realize she did it just because she cared about me feeling better. "You know you don't have to earn my affection, right?" she told me when I mentioned this. "I'm not keeping score of what you do for me versus what I do for you. I'm just happy to be with someone who's genuinely happy to be with me too." That hit me harder than it should have. I realized I'd spent 2 years in a relationship where I was constantly trying to prove I was worth loving, and I'd accepted that as normal. The David situation has an epilogue that's pretty wild. He called me 2 weeks ago to tell me that Victoria had somehow gotten his new address and sent his wife AITA a 20-page letter explaining that their marriage was built on stolen love and that David belonged with her. AITA called the police. Victoria's now facing harassment charges in Oregon, which apparently violated the terms of her restraining order that I didn't even know existed. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this," David told me. "I had no idea she was capable of this level of whatever this is." "Obsession," I said. "It's obsession. And she's good at making it look like love until you're trapped in it." The most important thing I've learned from all of this is how to recognize the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves the idea of you. Victoria never loved me. She loved having someone stable and patient who would put up with being treated as a consolation prize. She loved having a relationship that required no growth or change on her part. Mira loves me. The actual me. Not the version of me that reminds her of someone else, or the version that might eventually become worthy of her attention. Just me, as I am right now. When Victoria showed up at my school 6 weeks ago asking for one more chance to explain herself, I realized I didn't need an explanation anymore. I understood exactly what had happened. I'd spent 2 years with someone who was emotionally unavailable and used fake tragedy to justify treating me poorly. "Blake, I'm different now," she said. "Therapy is helping me understand why I was so afraid to let David go. Victoria, I'm glad you're getting help, but I'm not interested in being your practice relationship while you learn how to be honest with someone. That's not what this is. It's exactly what this is. You want me to wait around while you figure out how to be a functioning partner, the same way you wanted me to wait around while you fantasized about your ex-husband coming back from the dead." She cried, said I was the only good thing in her life, that she'd do anything to fix what she'd broken. But I've learned something important. Being someone's only good thing isn't romantic. It's a red flag. Healthy people have multiple sources of meaning and happiness in their lives. I'm happier now than I've been in years. Not just because of Mira, though she's wonderful, but because I finally understand what a reciprocal relationship looks like. I understand what it means to be with someone who's genuinely excited about building a life together instead of just avoiding being alone. My friend Qley said something last week that really stuck with me. "You spent 2 years trying to be good enough for someone who was never going to think anyone was good enough. Now you're with someone who thinks you're more than good enough exactly as you are. That's not luck. That's what normal looks like."